Hello and welcome to the Pinfall Rewind. Today we are going back 23 years to the Royal Rumble 1998. Joining me to look at this Royal Rumble is Barnesy and Jordan. Guys, what were you up to in January 1998?
God, it seems like a long time ago now. I wasn't actually into wrestling at this point. It was just before I was about to get into the realms of WWE. So I was about 9 years old at primary school, probably playing Kiss Chase around the playgrounds.
Yeah, well, it would have been a month till my 7th birthday, so I would have probably been sitting on the floor with an Argos catalogue, circling every damn toy in there. Something kids these days won't be doing.
Yeah, I was 11 years old. I was at junior school and I wasn't really into wrestling either. I sort of watched this Rumble back sort of when I was a little bit older. But yeah, it's a good Rumble, so I'm looking forward to discussing it. It went down on the 18th of January 1998. It was the 11th annual Royal Rumble. It was in front of 18,542 fans. Do you remember when fans were allowed in the stadiums?
Yeah, I mean, that also seems like a novelty at the moment. When you watch them back, you don't realise how much the crowd just plays such a big part in it.
Mm. Yeah, there was a good crowd to this one. And this was probably headlined by the Royal Rumble, which was won by Stone Cold Steve Austin. He come in at number 24, last eliminating The Rock. What do you guys think of this Rumble?
I loved it. I mean, I think I love it as well just from the pure nostalgia point of view when you look back at it, because I got into wrestling just before WrestleMania 14, and obviously once you get into wrestling you sort of try and work out the storyline that's just come before where you get into it. So obviously this was one of the main VHSs that I used to constantly play in the house, and probably why Jordan has got some knowledge on this. Because I just loved it. I loved the mini match that happens sort of before the Rumble match, but just in terms of like why I love wrestling, it's probably down to Stone Cold Steve Austin. He's just one of my absolute heroes, and obviously he won back-to-back Rumbles. So I think it's like when you pick your football team, you almost want to be picking someone who's winning all the time, and obviously Austin at that point was just coming into the Attitude Era. He was kicking ass. And obviously everyone wanted to try and get him out, and it was like the goodie at the end, winning. There's a complete build-up in the show of him, getting chased around the arena and, people looking for him. And then all of a sudden when he comes into the ring, everyone stops and they try and gang up on him a little bit. But that Texas rattlesnake can't be kept down, and obviously he has the final say. And, yeah, just so good when he wins. And, yeah, it's funny that he does beat The Rock at the end, because obviously they then go on to have one of the best rivalries probably of my childhood.
Yeah, you knew you were transported back to the 90s when the first thing that happens is Goldust comes out in a silver attire, black thong and dyed blue hair. I mean, it was just a lot of fun going back. The crowd is always like on the knife edge. It's like they're almost going to riot if there's something they're unhappy about. It's something that's sort of lost a little bit with sort of wrestling crowds now. It was a lot of fun to see. And then the start of the Rumble, just Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie just going blow for blow with their chair shots. I was like, you knew you were back when health and safety was not around as much. Like you, just awesome. Just watching Austin do his thing. Vince trying to get him out of the Rumble by putting a bullseye on his head. And yeah, it was interesting to see The Rock get that far, because at them sort of years, he's probably on his way to the main event. So you could see where they was just starting to take him from the Nation of Domination and move him into that main event status.
Yeah, I think Stone Cold Steve Austin is definitely the star of the show on this one. But they were sort of it seems like building up The Rock to be the next sort of big star. He lasted 51 minutes, 32 seconds, which was the longest out of everyone. He came in at number 4, and then he was the last one eliminated. So you could definitely tell they're building up The Rock in this one.
He also had an Intercontinental match as well versus Ken Shamrock. So double duty to do the length of that Rumble and a match. Which, I mean, the finish to most of the matches as well beforehand were pure 90s WWE as well. He sort of Shamrock won, but he stuck the brass knuckles in his pants, so the ref had to go investigate. And yeah, he was just quite a slimy heel back then, Rocky, compared to what you see during the 2000s.
Yeah, because obviously we're called the Pinfall, but on this card there was only 2 pinfalls in the whole card. So, but speaking of the Rumble match, then, so obviously Stone Cold Steve Austin's the headliner, he wins it. The Rock, he sort of becomes a star almost in this as well. But what about Mick Foley? Comes in 3 times. That's 3 different personas. Do you think that's because there wasn't as many sort of stars back then, or do you just think it was just to sort of profile sort of Mick Foley, Catch Jack Mankind?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this myself, like, because now you think of the plethora of talent in WWE, and you're like, there's people that you're expecting to come into the Rumble, and then they just don't even get a slot. Whereas back then, obviously, there was, it seems like there was a smaller card, and yeah, having the 3 faces of Foley turn up, obviously at the beginning when Cactus Jack comes out, you think that he's obviously only going to be the one that turns up out of the 3 of them. But when Dude Love and Mankind come in later on, it is a bit like, oh, they have taken up a couple of other places. But no, I actually like that. It was, I think it's just because obviously that year in '98, you have the big feud with Dude Love and Austin shortly after Mania. You have Cactus Jack obviously a couple of years later. Big main event match at a Rumble against Triple H. So it was just like the start, and obviously I think Mankind only come into WWE in '96, so I think it was probably, I'm not sure if they were in the '97 Rumble, but it was like the first time they all got to be in the Rumble, and for me they put on a good show. I loved it.
Yeah, I think it's just part of the charm of the Rumble, just a bit of fun sometimes having, they kept saying how Cactus Jack was his only entrance, and then the other 2 followed suit. The one thing I did find hard to sort of notice was that who the legends were, because they're all so old school for me. I was like, who is the legends amongst this current crop? So yeah, trying to identify them was quite tough asking.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw this or noticed it, or it might be something you want to look back on. But when Phineas Godwin gets eliminated, his foot, he basically knocks out the referee. Might be something you want to look back on, and basically, I think it's Jack Doan, and he basically goes down with concussion.
Oh, really?
For a while, I noticed it at first where he sort of was down, and then he stood up, and they had like towels around his neck, and then later on in the Rumble he'd gone, and I sort of was reading up about it, and he had a concussion, so it might be something to look back on.
Jeez, yeah, I'll definitely have a look back on that. I mean, Henry Godwin recently made appearance at Survivor Series, coming out briefly on the Undertaker's retirement, so it was funny seeing some of these old faces back in there. I think Savio Vega was in there as well, dressed in his red vest and his blue jeans. I just love seeing the old wrestling. When you watch it, you're just like, just brings back childhood memories, doesn't it? So it's always a good feeling when you're watching it. One
thing they definitely need to bring back is the trash can over someone's head, because then they just pop it over there and just start wading on them, and there's just loads of fun. I enjoyed that so much.
Yeah, but when I got interested in it was probably about '99 maybe, and so some wrestlers I've never even heard of. I don't know if you've heard of these or know much about them, but I think there was someone called Tom Brandy. I think he came in at number 3, because lasted about 12 seconds. Never ever heard of him. I don't know if he's done anything before or since, but and Chains, do you know anything about him?
Yeah, Chains was in the DOA, so I know a little bit about him, and there's been a few like wrestlers called Chains throughout, and like WWE almost tried to make him like the main one in wrestling, or WWF back at the time, but yeah, he was part of DOA, and he was pretty much like a badass. He was like what the Undertaker turned out to be in sort of 2000, 2001 when he come back as the American Badass. They were sort of the original guys, but I can't remember who Chains teamed with. There was 2 of them, and the other guy had a bald head. But yeah, for the life of me, I can't remember what his name is.
Yeah, obviously, none of us watched this sort of live or in the moment, but I guess Stone Cold Steve Austin was probably the obvious winner in this. Was like, for anyone else who you thought could have won this?
I think when you watch it back, the way they build it, it almost feels very predictable. I don't know if that was what you felt when you were watching it, but you're just like, obviously we know because it was 23 years ago, as you pointed out, but when you're watching it and you see the production around it, and they're all being interviewed, they're all looking for Austin in the backstage, and then when he does come out, obviously there's I think it's before his music hits the entry, before no one does come out, so then you're like, oh, that was Austin's number, and Jerry the King Lawler's really good at selling it, and then so when he does come out, you're like, Yes, here he comes. But
It's because back then as well, the no social media or like no smartphones and stuff, you can really keep stuff under wraps, and you could see it when like the glass broke and then no one come down from the front, and like Jerry's selling it that they found him, they beat him up, and he's not coming, and then very much Shield-esque, he's out through the crowd, and just they go nuts when they see it finally, like see him come into the ring, and it was purely built for him, and sometimes you just got to let the fans go home happy, and they definitely would have been leaving that one happy.
Interesting seeing old Iron Mike Tyson in the crowd as well, because obviously he was really giving it for Stone Cold, and obviously at the time he was like one of the baddest men on the planet in the boxing scene. So to see him so excited to see wrestling up close, and they obviously had a few shots with him and Vince and a very young looking Shane McMahon.
Yeah, because Tyson had just been done for the fight on Holyfield, hadn't he? So this is probably the only decent work he could get, I'd have thought.
Yeah.
He's getting paid so much. But yeah, obviously in time we find out he sort of teams up with Shawn Michaels, who defeated The Undertaker in a casket match. The end is with Kane comes down, interferes, beats up The Undertaker, puts him in the casket and sets it on fire. What a way to end the pay-per-view.
It was just carnage. It was like proper old school main eventing where Hebner would go down and then absolute chaos ensues. So that whole of DX are out and Kane's out. It was just so much fun. I was reading about it. I didn't realise that it was a drop on the casket during that match, which was the reason Michaels left WWE to sort of because of his back. I never knew the injury come from that match, so it was quite interesting to watch. But as far as before the chaos broke out, it was just lovely to watch two of the absolute legends of WWE in their prime just go at it. I know they had a Mania match right for Michael's retirement way down the line, but to see him in their absolute peak was just incredible. And Shawn Michaels is by far one of my favourite wrestlers ever. He could always put on a show.
Yeah, that casket match is so good, and I even like the build up to it. I like that it was the main event. I'm not too sure how many main event matches they had for the WWE title after the Royal Rumble match itself. They usually end now with the Royal Rumble winner pointing at the sign and with the fireworks and stuff. So it was a bit of a throwback to have the main event at the end. And yeah, like you say, obviously this main event happened just a couple of months after the Montreal Screwjob. So Michaels was obviously the big favourite going into it. And yeah, like you say, he injured his back in this match. So it just shows you how tough he was just to continue with the storyline going forward. Obviously, they put him on crutches and stuff on Raw for a few weeks after this in the build-up to Mania. But you know how tough he is to go through all of that and then still put on an absolute masterclass. But just talking about Kane for 1 second, I won't admit to having too many nightmares in my life, but my God, when I first started watching Kane, and like obviously after this Rumble, in this Rumble he puts the casket on fire, and he's in a couple of Raws following this, he burns cameramen from pointing at them, and it's real like, Jesus, this is crazy. Like, if this guy comes to my house, I had an alleyway by the side of my house, and I always used to just think when it was dark he could be hiding down there and come and get me. But yeah, so good. Like seeing Kane, that for me was the best Kane that we ever saw in WWF or WWE. Just an absolute monster, as they all call him. And obviously, yeah, as well, when he'd only just recently made his debut in wrestling at the Bad Blood pay-per-view, where he obviously interrupted The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels' Hell in a Cell match, just ripping the door off its hinges. I mean, that was another reason I sort of got nightmares, because I was like, he could just come and rip my bedroom door off. But yeah, so good. Love the ending. Just obviously it meant that the Undertaker and Kane were going to have a feud moving forward, and yeah, so good.
Yeah, was that the first ever casket match?
Nah, there'd been a fair few before that. Yokozuna, there was a fair few before that.
Yeah, because I was just thinking, I mean, Hell in a Cell was pretty new back then. It just shows like how those two sort of, trailblazed so many new sort of stipulations in wrestling, and you couldn't trust the two better wrestlers really.
Yeah, and to think that 11 years later, these two would be tearing it down at WrestleMania is crazy to think, really. You can imagine 11 years from now, some of the wrestlers are sort of still in the show. It's crazy.
I think with Taker as well, when you look back, because he went for so long, you forgot how athletic he was for such a big guy. So when you go back to like the 90s and early 2000s, watch him like flying around the ring, you forget like he used to jump over the top ropes to the outside and stuff. For 6'10" or whatever he was just well athletic.
One thing I took from this match as well was obviously Triple H and China were with Shawn Michaels, and how different they sort of looked like a couple of years later, really, if you fast forward like just 2 years. Like Triple H is the main man in the company, but back then he was just sort of just supporting Shawn Michaels, wasn't he?
Yeah, like 1998 was Triple H's big breakout year, also with The Rock, where he goes on to replace Farouk as the leader of the Nation of Domination, and then them two factions just going up sort of in the middle of the card that year. By the end of the year, they're both in the main event scene. So, yeah, like we said with like The Rock having a 51-minute entrance in the Royal Rumble, it definitely felt like that was the start of his big push in the company. But yeah, following this, obviously Triple H has some real big matches this year, like obviously fighting against The Rock. And I think once you build a good rivalry between yourselves and you earn the trust of Vince McMahon, and he knows every time you go out there you're going to put on a show, like you just said with Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, you put yourself in that main events category straight away. And like even just thinking now, like some of the guys that come up from NXT and stuff, you're just like, they obviously don't truly earn Vince McMahon's maybe total respect or trust to come up and make a big, movement in the main roster. So, yeah, obviously you have to be really special to get in them positions these days. But back in the day, Triple H and The Rock are two of the best of all time.
Yeah, elsewhere on the card, what other matches did you enjoy? I know you touched on it earlier, Barnsley, about you like the minis.
Yeah, I love the minis. I think as well it's just because I love Sonny.
Why was she referee?
I have no idea. Why not? Yeah. I mean,
something to get her on TV.
Some of the things that Jerry Lawler was saying in that match, I mean, yeah, you wouldn't probably get away with too much of that these days. Talking about Max Mini jumping off a curb and committing suicide and things like that, you're like, it's a little bit interesting when you watch it back these days, but I suppose that was just the sign of the times and what was going on in 98.
Yeah, especially with Jerry, like in the 90s, like how much sex was at the forefront of everything. Like even through that match, he was just going, "Come sit on my lap, come sit on my lap," and it's just like you wouldn't get away with that at all now these days. And I think when Mark Merrow entered the Rumble and Sable was at ringside, he was just like, again, like a dog in heat, just sort of, after her. But the minis match was cool. They're just quite fun to watch, and just how athletic they are. And then Sonny gets a big moment, picking up Max Mini and taking them all out.
Yeah,
it's what the crowd wants.
Just gives you that good feel sort of moment. But yeah, like obviously we were just talking about like the pay-per-view with the Montreal Screwjob. Sonny apparently was accused by Michaels on Bret Hart of having an affair with him, and so obviously when you like read up on stuff like that and you watch the documentaries they've got on it, it's like then you see her a couple of months later sort of in a minis match on a pay-per-view. So she was sort of the first real sort of pin-up girl, I suppose, that I remember him from watching wrestling. I know there was probably a couple before her, like Miss Elizabeth and whoever else. But yeah, I mean, anytime Sonny's on the TV for me is a big win.
Yeah. Other matches. One thing that stuck out to me was the very first match was Vader versus Goldust, and the pop that Vader got was like incredible. And then again, when he come out in the actual Rumble match, he was proper over. I think the fans proper love Vader.
Yeah, it's Vader time, Wilbs. It's Vader time.
Yeah, and again, for a big guy, so sort of athletic, and he had good feuds with Michaels, and back then for someone of his size, it was hard to get near the top of the card, and it was obviously a massive crowd favourite. And just the finish to the match where he had Goldust's, I cannot remember her name,
Luna
on his back, and the big old Vader bomb, and yeah, that sent the Kodak flashes off. Like, catching that moment.
Yeah, that's something you don't sort of see now in wrestling, is it? When you do have a crowd, the sort of flashing cameras, because obviously everyone's got sort of modern phones these days. But
you knew it was a big move when those flashes were going, and it almost heightened the move. You were like, this is the finish, because all the flashes went off, and it was like the moment captured on camera.
Yeah.
So it's a shame that has gone, really.
What do you reckon? What was Goldust wearing? Was it something you'd wear on a Saturday night?
Maybe you'd catch me in it. Maybe on my stag.
I mean, it was hilarious when he was coming out. They were sort of going through the feud leading up to it, and how he was the artist formerly known as Goldust. So he was almost like anti-Goldust, and it was very, very interesting what he was wearing. And they showed him on, I think, like a few Raws beforehand. He was like dressed as a woman, and like you could just see how back then that was so out of place for someone to be doing that.
Yeah, there's a Twitter account. It's a really good one. I'm sure you've probably followed it. It's called the 90s WWE, and they put a photo up of like just a few guys in the ring for the Royal Rumble, and there's so many comments saying, like, who's the guy in the bikini and things like that. It doesn't even look like Goldust really, because he's not obviously in his gold normal attire, so it doesn't really look like one we know as Goldust.
Yeah. Goldust is an interesting one. He's always had a big personality in wrestling or in WWF throughout his career. And a funny thing is, he's always been my mum's favourite wrestler. God knows why, but she took a liking to old Goldust.
So as a pay-per-view, I thought it was pretty decent, really. Like we said, we didn't really watch it in the actual times, but I'm sure you let me the video a few times, Barnsey, and I think I've seen it quite a few times now. I think it's a solid Rumble, to be fair. Yeah,
when you take it for what it is and the storylines that play out, the building of characters, like obviously we see over that coming year, I think you can look back on it and think it was a real successful card. The emergence of Stone Cold Steve Austin again. Obviously, I think people forget that he won back-to-back Rumbles. He won 1997. I think he come in really early in that Rumble and was in it for about 50 odd minutes like The Rock. So they obviously trusted him. He had a big year, obviously big matches against Bret Hart. And then he was sort of at the point where he was taking over the number one role in the company. So to win back-to-back Rumbles, and obviously he's one of the only 3-time winners of the Rumble. So he obviously set a massive legacy in the late 90s. And just like I said earlier, one of my favourites. So whenever I look back on it, it's just something I always remember.
Yeah, I mean, his trajectory was so high, so quick. It was harder to not have him win it and go on and achieve everything he did, because he was just so popular and you could see it immediately. And he's just a quality wrestler.
So simple as well, because all he was dressed in the ring with was with his black trunks, black boots. Nothing eccentric, but when he got on the mic and he just told you how it was, and then he'd back it up, phenomenal talent. Just love that guy.
Well, I just liked, it was like his walk to the ring. He sort of walked and looked at you like, I'm about to do you. Like,
open up a can of whip ass.
It's like you've literally pissed me off to the point I have to come out here and talk, like smack some sense into you. And it was just it was just brawling. And it's what's probably missed now in WWE, someone like that. There's a lot of candidates who could be like that, but they probably wouldn't do it as well as him. But they're just fun to be around. It's simple, quick finishes, just drink beer, smack people around the face.
The thing is with Austin, he's obviously seen as one of the greatest of all time, and rightly so, but obviously he wasn't really around for that long when you think about it. It was 96 to 99, then he obviously had his injury. He was out pretty much all of about a year, and then he was back again from like the end of 2000 to 2001 probably in his prime, and then obviously he left for a while, didn't he? He came back for like 2 matches and that was it. So really you're talking about 4, maybe 5 years of absolute quality, but he was the man for them 5 years. Like I look at him and think there's no one better than him. Really, for sports entertainment, he was the absolute man.
Yeah, he did a lot of, I guess it's developmental, if you call it, in WCW, and then I think he did a little stint in ECW before coming to then WWF with, I think Ted DiBiase brought him in as like the ringmaster. And then I guess the best, because I think he was like, the name might be wrong, but I think in WCW he was with like Rick Rude and stuff, or like the Hollywood Blondes, and it sounds like the best thing that sort of happened to Austin was his hair falling out, because it just changed his character for him, and he just, he won that King of the Ring, said Austin 316, and then the rest is history.
Holler to that.
Yeah, I think it's obviously going to go down as a Rumble for Stone Cold Steve Austin winning it, his second Rumble in a row. And yeah, like we said, some of the matches were a little bit sort of finishes weren't great, but it was still a very entertaining pay-per-view back in 1998.
I mean, it was part of, I guess it was just part of the landscape back then. Like, even the tag match, I think they handcuffed Hawk or Animal to the post, and it was all screwy finishes, but it was the vibe you got from the crowd. That's what they wanted. They wanted it to just be like chaos. Like, from the very start of that pay-per-view, they were like, you could tell they just had tens of beers, and like, they just want to see brawling and watch it all just, turn into utter carnage.
Cool. So thumbs up all round for that pay-per-view.
Thumbs up.
I imagine back in the 90s as well, when we were all kids stunnering everyone at school or at home.
Yeah, so that will do us for the first ever Pinfall Rewind. That was the Royal Rumble 1998. My name's Wilbs. Been joined by Barnsley and Jordan. Give us a follow on Twitter @ThePinfallPod. That's all we've got time for. Ring the bell.